So now we go to Nicholas Passaquin, Vice President, Global Head of Sourcing Delivery, Thomson Reuters. And I'm here looking at 20 years in sourcing and procurement, and leads a multicultural team across 22 locations in APAC, LATAM, and EMEA. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Speaking here last year, I've started my presentation by showing a video introducing Thomson Reuters. Sometimes I use pictures from some of our journalists to create an impact. This year, given the subject, I've chosen to go directly inside the subject because that's a quite wide one, actually. Now, you might wonder what a global head of sourcing delivery does. It does a number of things, but one, which is interesting today, I've designed, implemented, and led our sourcing shared services. And I'm going to tell you how we leverage those to transform our sourcing organization. Does it work? Yep. Before doing that, I'll give you just a bit of context to understand what Thomson Reuters is doing and where we are coming from, and why we manage the change the way we did. 1 billion people every day. 1 billion people every day are seeing Reuters news. And all of you probably saw it today already. But it's only the top of the iceberg. It's only a fragment of what we do, but that's the most visible part. As someone said earlier, we are a B2B company, really, apart from those 165 years of being a news agency, which is important for our culture anyway. Question: what is an answer? And how do you measure the value of an answer? Answers are cheap. There are millions of people and places to find answers, but trusted answers from trusted sources? Trusted answers help financial professionals to make profitable decisions. They help attorney advising clients. They help accountants to create efficient workflow. Living in a decision economy, we've built our company around the need to connect our customers with relevant and accurate information so they could make those decisions that are going to matter to their business. All of your company here are likely to be customers of us. Most of you would not even know about it, but there is one part where you might have an interest in our financial and risk divisions. We actually have supply chain solutions to mitigate risk, and we do third-party risk assessments product as well, using some of our data, some of our content. One last thing about Thomson Reuters before moving on, which is important for what I'm going to talk about. We are a truly global company, not only by revenue, but by our employee presence. We grew a lot by acquisition, so we ended up with a sourcing organization, which was highly fragmented, very dispersed, to support Thomson Reuters, which is not the most efficient way. So let's go in the heart of our conversation today. And let me talk first about the burning platform and why we had to change. Back in 2012, we had a new CFO and a new CPO who came on board. We were just coming out of a large integration. Thomson acquired Reuters, and we probably needed a new level of energy. They came with a number of objectives, and for sourcing, they came basically saying, well, your savings contribution in 3-year time should be 3 times higher than what it is today, which was about 50%. One of the key measures we chose at the time, and I've heard that Solvay talked about it earlier, we talked about return on investment, basically. And we said it should be 8 times, basically, in 3 years. You should be achieving that. So return on investment, we talked about it, is the savings, is balanced by how much you cost and what you cover in terms of spend. So that's really the 3 things we had to influence. How much we cost, how much we bring back, how involved are we? So what we said at the time is that we needed to review our delivery model. There was no way we would be able to achieve 50% increase with the organization we had before. So we said, let's look at having the right footprint, having the right people in the right location, having the right skills. So train people, change the model, basically. That's what we've said. I'm not going to cover everything today because I could speak for the entire day. I'm going to focus only on one element of the transformation, which is how we leverage Thomson Reuters' presence in low-cost countries to transform our organization. And we call that the right sourcing delivery model. So when our CPO came and said, well, 50% is your target, we said basically, he gathered us and he said, how are we going to do that? We said the first things we need to do, we need to leverage the cost of delivering sourcing across the organization. That's where we should be starting, because there was no budget anyway for us. We could not say, well, 50%, we just hire 20 more people, we just have a new system, tools, and processes, but there was just no fund for that. So we said the first thing is really lowering the cost. At the time, we've already identified that there was a gap in terms of skills and expertise in our organization. So we said we are going to use some of that money, because that was not cutting our operational budget, which was going to make that number. So we said, let's invest that money. Let's hire in specific skills, specific expertise we need in specific locations. Now, I've said it earlier, we needed as well to train our people, for them to be able to achieve what we were willing them to do. The last thing, and that's something which came afterward that we actually added to as an objective. We had very experienced employees in a number of locations, and we needed to make sure they were involved in the high-end complex projects. So the first things we did in our journey of transforming ourselves is that we created that simple 2x2 matrix. One hand, complexity, the other hand, impact on the business. Impact could be risk, could be innovation, could be profit and loss purely. Then we said there is 3 layers of activity we do today. There is tactical buying, tactical sourcing, strategic sourcing. Well, pretty simple, low risk, low value, simple terms and conditions. Then from higher up, highly customized, complex solutions, carrying risk to the organization. Then what we've done, we actually surveyed our team members. We said, how much time are you spending on all of that? Guess what? Everybody was doing a bit of everything. And you don't really want a sourcing director based out of New York looking at a low-risk $1,000 deal. That does not make any sense in an organization. So that's where we said, there's something we need to be doing here. Let's look at it. And let's try to actually centralize tactical buying. So we did define tactical buying at the time, and we said anything under $50,000, which carry low risk to the organization. So things like software for us would be excluded of that, as an example. We would try to offshore that. We don't really want any of our experienced team members looking at that. We said tactical sourcing. Yeah, definitely, there is an opportunity, but that's slightly more complex. Let's first really look at tactical buying. And then we did define as well strategic sourcing in terms of location. The location of the person is important. It needs early engagement, it needs market knowledge, the supplier relationship is important. So definitely that person needs to be where the action is happening. And sometimes where the action is happening can be offshore, can be in low-cost location, can be anywhere. But that's what qualifies strategic sourcing, not really being in an offshore center, just being where the action is happening. So we came with a vision that we shared with the team. We explained them what we were willing to do, because we need their support to make that work. Basically, that strategy was twofold. We said in key business hub, key location, we want to have our more experienced resources. We want really to have presence there. Then we want to create sourcing shared services centers with really 2 arms in there, still strategic sourcing people, because there is this decision maker in those locations. Plus, if you've operated in shared services before, you can't build a team only with junior entry level employees. You need as well more experienced people that are going to provide development, that are going to help them be part of escalation, etc. So we shared that vision. We said that's really where we want to go. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the journey that we've taken. So, as I said earlier, $50,000 and less. Thomson Reuters is a globally present organization. We have shared services already for our content teams. We already had shared services in other functions. We said, we are not going to outsource that. Thomson Reuters is not the most disciplined organization. The process needed to be defined. We did not want to go to an external party, so we said we are going to do it ourselves. So we actually picked up Bangalore as the first location in India because we had a team processing purchase request into purchase order in that location. So we actually picked up two couple of people from that team, two top talent. We said, you are going to be our first tactical buyers. You are going to manage Singapore requirement. So anything under 50,000 US dollars is going to come to you. And obviously, we use that pilot to create processes, to create the environment for them to be able to perform. We then expanded that process across Asia before going further. When we actually deployed it across Asia, we realized that Bangalore would not work for everything. So we opened a second center in Beijing for North Asian support, basically, and because we needed Japanese, Korean, Mandarin language. So that's been an evolving process. That's one of the things as well, because it's been done internally versus an outsourcing. We could have changed, well, we changed it actually a couple of times. We revised the processes. We had Bangalore initially in mind. We opened Beijing because that's what fits Thomson Reuters. When we deployed the US, actually, we opened a third center in Costa Rica. We tried from Bangalore. It did not work. Time zone, culture challenge was just too complicated for us as an organization. Plus, we've got a huge presence in Latin America. So the team in Costa Rica is able to then support those countries. What we did during those, 4 months, which are here, is actually first developing a process. When you build shared service operation, one of the key things which makes you successful, apart from the people, and I'm going to talk about people a bit after, is as well the processes. You need really to have something structured. You need for the people to be able to follow a path, to escalate when they don't know. Remember, we talk here only about junior people, so they need really to know what they should be doing. We put as well in process control, because we want to be able to measure the effectiveness of the process. And it's not only about being bureaucratic. One of the things that came up during the conversation with our stakeholders was the fear of slowing them down. Said, yeah, that's cool, we have someone down there, we just ping them and they do it. Said, well, if you move that 6-7 hours away, plus a time zone, plus etc., how are you going to manage that? Well, we really had to come with something which would be operationally efficient if we want their buy-in. So we put control, we had SLAs, and we structured it. So I've said two things important in shared services, and I should probably have started by the people, actually, especially when you operate in India, a little bit less Beijing and Costa Rica, but you could really quickly end up with over 30% of attrition. You hire people, you train them, they go somewhere else. That's definitely a very high risk when you are in that kind of environment. So we put a huge emphasis actually in the hiring process, but as well in their career path, in developing them, in making sure there was a future for them in our organization, that they would understand where we were going as an organization. So really, that's been something which was critical for us to achieve. So a lot of emphasis on that, on the people. One last thing, and it's worth mentioning it. I talked about return on investment. We talked about how much time we were going to save. We talked about how efficient it could be. I think the other things as well that we should not forget, we have internal stakeholders, and they are having $10,000 deal, but they are dealing as well with us on $1 million deals. So we want them to be happy, basically. Or we want not them to be happy. We want them to see value out of those processes. So there is actually a systematic survey process which we are asking stakeholders actually to give us feedback. And sometimes we actually follow up on those feedback verbally. We have debrief on the first few months of the pilot usually to be able to evolve our processes. Again, it's offshoring, it's not outsourcing. So we could do that as much as we wish. We could have those conversations. We could refine our processes. So that was really the reasons as well why we chose offshoring for us. So 2012 to 2016, the company evolved, as I said. And we've got 3 shared services locations, Costa Rica, Beijing, Bangalore. We've got 3 key business hubs, London, New York, and again, where we actually hired the 18 people I've talked about earlier. A little bit more than 18 actually by now, because we needed expertise in those locations to be able to make a difference. As a result of that, all the red dot you see here is actually location we closed. I've said earlier, we were a geographically dispersed organization. We had to consolidate our resources. So some of the work done in those locations have been moved either in shared services, either in the key business hubs. But that's really how we evolved. Now, if you count the blue dots, there is more than 6 locations. So I've said 3 and 3, it's never going to make 6 anyway. We are quite a complex organization. We know it. We've got stakeholders in a lot of locations that still require support. So we will never end up with 6 locations, but that's how the map looks like today, and it will probably continue to evolve up to a stage. End of last year, after 3 years of operation, we looked at the results. During that time, we mainly deployed tactical buying. We did some inroads in tactical sourcing a little bit. But we said it's the right time to ask ourselves, where do we want to go? So we look first in terms of capabilities. We invested in the team, both by hiring and training. So we saw a significant shift in terms of capabilities. We opened those shared services. We were expecting out of them as well additional savings contribution. We were expecting from them as well to see our strategic sourcing managers spending more time on high-end complex projects. So we came back to them. We actually made a survey, and we've seen actually an increase. They are working on the right projects. So we don't, well, I'm not going to say we don't have a sourcing director looking after $1,000 deal. I'm sure it's still happening, but a lot less than before. They really focus on things which are going to make a difference to Thomson Reuters now. What we saw as a result is that, well, our return on investment overall went up. It went over 8 times, basically. The contribution, we actually increased by more than 50%. The things we were not expecting is actually stakeholder satisfaction went up during that time. We always had a survey process, even before 2012. But if you think about it, it makes sense as well. Before, you had someone who would deal with multi-million and $10,000 deal. So they will not dedicate a lot of attention to the $10,000, where shared services, it's their prime objectives. There is a process, so they would just take the right level of attention. Similarly, the person who was dealing with multi-million dollars, definitely they now have the time to focus specifically on that. They are not bothered by those small deals anymore, so it makes sense. So what we said, end of last year, is that, yeah, let's go. We could move further. Really, we achieved what we said we would be achieving, even more than that, basically, so let's go ahead. Well, what we've done is moving from a pure tactical buying model. So we said there is US, UK, which have been deployed, and APAC. Let's complete that process. Let's deploy it across the rest of the organization to have a consistent model across all of Thomson Reuters. Let's move up the value chain as well with our sourcing support centers. We had talent in there. We had good tactical buyers that could definitely do more. So we give them the opportunity to manage end-to-end smaller subcategories. They do things like translation, membership, and subscription as example. We gave them additional project. Vendor rationalization is one. They do M&A reviews and draftings, and we keep looking at it. They do compliance in a number of areas, and that's an evolving model. That's where we are today. So that's my red dot before, just looking slightly different to confuse you. One main center in Bangalore, one in Costa Rica, one in Beijing. The one in Costa Rica and Beijing are really there more for language support and time zone challenging. Our prime center is Bangalore. We still have a small challenge. We might open a 4th center in Europe, actually, because we see that there is tactical sourcing activities which we struggle to manage in those time zones, because we still have a number of things that are coming out of the UK. We are a very heavily US and UK-based organization. So we are just looking at that right now, basically. We said, actually, there is a number of things that might benefit from being in Poland, in Madrid. We still have to determine where we are going to put that one. I've said it's an evolving process. So what we did as well earlier this year, we actually set up a dedicated structure in our shared services organization to look at opportunity. A small team is actually running analysis. They are assessing opportunities. They do the piloting. They do the testing. And then if it works, if it's operationally efficient, if it brings value to the organization and it works, it would then be transferred into the operation team. So we actually put a structure in place sitting next to the shared services to be able to move faster than we were before, really. If we take a quick look at the value that has been created over 3 years, tactical buying, Well, a very high and sustainable return on investment, which is really one of the drivers. We created a career path for people, and then our stakeholders are happy. So a pretty good story overall. Tactical sourcing is slightly more complex. It takes more time, and then we struggle in certain areas. And I've told you we might just open something in Europe because we do struggle to manage that properly. Now, still quite a good benefits delivered anyway. The return on investment is slightly lower, but then the benefit is really more the time the sourcing professional are going to be able to dedicate on strategic opportunities when we will be able to intake that into the shared services. That's really where the value comes from. So for both, there is definitely direct and indirect benefits. There is direct savings. There is a direct contribution to the organization in terms of efficiency, in terms of control process. And there is indirect. We created career paths. We've got a better engagement model. The motivation is pretty high. And then the rest of the team is benefiting as well from that because they can focus on the right things for them, on the right priorities. I'm going to just finish by giving you 3 key takeaways, basically, from our experience. My first one, and someone say, try and fail fast, but that's exactly what it is. My way of saying it is make sure you're ready, basically. Make sure you're ready because you don't really want actually to fail too often, and you don't really want to have failure that takes too long. So for us, we looked at 4 dimensions, basically. We look at people. I've talked about it. It's critical. Roles, responsibility, capabilities. We looked at process. It needs to be structured. It needs to be measured. You need to be able to escalate when you need. Knowledge is just critical. You want them to be independent. You want to have up-to-date knowledge. You want to have something which is searchable. So it's something you need to assess. Then the last element for us talks about stakeholders. When we tell service management, we engage them from the start. So we really introduce the process to them. We explained it, we shared it, and that's one element which was important for us. So whatever way you choose, for us, it's been those 4 quadrants, but we assess our readiness before really rolling it, and we keep assessing it actually. Don't underestimate differences. Don't underestimate the challenge of the culture, of the time zone, of the language. We are not living in one world. We are living in hundreds of countries. We're all different. And really the message is educate your stakeholders, educate the team. You are going to see escalation resulting from misunderstanding, and quite often misunderstanding coming from those differences. So that's really the second point. The third one, and that's a Thomson Reuters picture, by the way, which is from our journalist. I've said a couple of times, it's not outsourcing, it's offshoring. And I think that's why it worked for us, because as a company, it's our culture as well. So it's been Thomson Reuters employee working with Thomson Reuters employees. We actually made sure there was a sense of team. The shared services, even though I call them shared services, they are sourcing people. They are all belonging to the sourcing organization. So we made sure that there was a sense of belonging, that there was connection created, there was relationship. So when there was challenging, they could work together, really. So that's been 4 years of operation. I think it's a great success. It transformed our organization, and there is more to come, basically. Thank you.